All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Rucha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is The Beast with 7 Heads and 10 Horns. And pretty much I wrote it like that because, we're at a point now where, we're doing things more on a, you know, incognito type, way. Um, as a belt of Esau starts tightening up on the world, the Lord is going to make it harder and harder for this truth to, be out there. And eventually, the Lord's going to have these devils shut down these different avenues of truth, because it's too evident that what we've been saying through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, through the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Kodash, is coming to pass. And everything is, falling into place. And these devils, they've been studying us. They've been, paying individuals to watch, research, infiltrate, gather information, to see what they could do to stop this truth. And in doing that, they're finding out the beautiful truth for us and the ugly truth for them. That what we've been saying, which are not our words, it's Yahweh Bashem Yahushai's words, are actually coming to pass. And everything from history to the prophecies that we've been speaking, linking it up to history, historical empires and figures, and different, things on the earth today, devices like the micro C-hip and things of that nature, the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, the Renaissance period, the empires of Esau going back to the Greeks. This is all slapping Esau in the face to the point where he wants to stop everything. So last night I was, watching the Elder Pastor's video where he was, I believe that was Elder Pastor's video where he was speaking on a video that the Elder Yahweh Kanan did out of England. And pretty much, I believe that was a video when, and somehow the EU was mentioned or something like that. And, a few, I believe the Elder Apostle Gabar also kind of touched on it in his video. I'm not sure. You watch so many videos, there's so much going on, your head will be spinning. And this is why we totally rely on the Holy Spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai to guide us on what to bring out, the work with our spirits, our minds, our mouths, to bring out these lessons to be edifying, because the information that's out there is overwhelming. And this is why you have individuals like the IUIC and the ISUBK now that are scrambling, trying to save face and trying to clear up and clean up, things that they said in the past concerning the micro C-hip not being the MOTB. Now they're starting to weave it into their doctrine, to a certain degree, so that they can not look foolish, when the time comes. But the receipts are already out there, brothers, beginning with the Apostle Tahar and brothers, elders out there that all have receipts on everything that you've said over the years, since we've been on YouTube, everything that you've said and how your doctrines have changed and how you're trying to weave in, the MOTB being the micro C-hip without actually coming out and saying it, just indirectly here and there, saying this and that and the other. They might throw a micro C-hip in there. I'm not discounting that the micro C-hip is not a part of it, but so they're weaving their magic, and Esau's trying to stop this truth. Now, when we deal with the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, we have to go back to the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, to where all of this started. This was the vision that Daniel had. Daniel 2 was Nebuchadnezzar's vision that Daniel broke down, that the Lord gave to Daniel to break down. And then Daniel also had this vision here in Daniel 7, which was a 4 different beasts that came up out of the earth. And when he saw these images in his vision, he actually saw beasts. But these beasts represented something. That's why the angel told him in the 17th verse, it says, the great beasts which are 4 kings or 4 kingdoms, which shall arise out of the earth. All right. So when we go to the 7th verse, it says, Daniel 7:7, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. So we're dealing with the 4th beast, which is the final beast of this whole Gentile or heathen empire system. All right, which was the Roman Empire. And when you go to Daniel, the 2nd chapter in the blue letter, they break down what the different verses are. They break down that it's talking about Rome, it's talking about Greece and Rome and so on and so forth. It breaks them down, like the Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. And after the Roman Empire, it would fall. But the Roman Empire was it was a complex empire because they didn't rule their empire like all of the other empires before them, because the empires before them had monarchs. A monarch is a king, and then he'll have sons, and his sons would be known as a prince, a prince or princess, plural. And they, when their father would get old, from their youth, they were trained up on how to be a ruler, after their father's death. They were taught law, they were taught different languages, they were taught, equity, they were taught how to, judge matters. They would sit in, certain, when they'll have like courts and different judgments that were being given, they would sit in to see how their father and his advisors would deal with certain situations. So this way they would learn hands-on, and eventually they would take over. But when the Roman Empire came in, they vowed to do away with that monarch system and have it to where the so-called people would rule, and they would commit their government to one man, and this one man was known as the Caesar, beginning with Julius Caesar, and that's where the term Caesar comes from, Domitian Caesar and Vespasian Caesar and Nero Caesar, so on and so forth, came from that. And that was the difference between the Roman Empire rule and the other empires ruling. And this is why in, I believe that was 44 BC, 41 BC. I don't remember exactly what date, or was that around 27, a little further down BC era, getting closer to the AD era, where Julius Caesar was assassinated because he was starting to set himself up as this dictatorial monarch, power, and they weren't having it. So they had to rub him out. And his stepson, Augustus Caesar, which his name is Octavian, he came into power. All right. So there was like a whole dynamic behind the whole, Roman rule and how it was ruled. All right. So this 4th beast was dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, because they had amassed not only the military might, but also the weapons that they borrowed from different empires, and the different military strategies they borrowed from different empires and incorporated them into, the Roman, way, Roman warfare. All right. It says, and also it was, it was considered an iron empire. So iron is the least of the metals that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his vision, but it's the strongest, because you had the gold, you had the silver, you had the bronze, and then you had the iron. And iron is the strongest out of all of them, but it's the least, valuable. All right. So they had a strong military force. And this is why when you look at the American military force, it's set up like the Roman Empire, because when you understand the prophecy stated that the ancient Roman Empire would fall, but then it would rise up again in the same stead, so to speak. It says, and it had great iron teeth, which represents power. It devoured and break in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, right? Because it made them, the different nations that were around at the time, citizens of Rome, and made them tributary. Now they allowed people to worship their own gods and worship, their religious ceremonies and all that, but they had to be tributary. And if they didn't, they would wage war against them, pretty much like America does today. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, as I explained to you, the way that it was ruled. And it had 10 horns. So this is what we want to deal with, because these 10 horns, when you go back into the history of the 10 horns, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, Heruli, the Vandals, the Suevi, Burgundians, the Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, the Lombards, so on and so forth. These were allies to the pagan Jake Roman Empire later on, because they came about on the scene around 250 BC, AD and up. But you had these different Germanic tribes that were in different parts of Europe, that some of the same ones that were also allied to the pagan Edomite Caesars. All right, when you do the research on it, now it doesn't go specific, because with the history of these allied forces that were mercenaries for Rome, it was, in spurts. They'll be allied with Rome for a few years, and then they'll be enemies. So it was like it's the history is all over the place, so it's impossible to pinpoint everything, precisely, but the point is that you had all these so-called European, nations, Germanic tribes and such, that were allied with Rome at different times. When you do the research on it, it's just a lot of history, so it's impossible to cover it all. So when the ancient Roman Empire fell, when the ancient Roman Empire fell from the power of the Edomites, it was translated to the power of Jake, which Jake is short for Jacob, the Israelites, beginning with Nerva in 96 AD. This was the last year of the Edomite emperor, which was Domitian, which was one of the three of the Flavian dynasty: Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. Okay, so once Jake took over, Jake didn't change anything except for who was ruling. They still ruled it as a pagan Roman Empire. It wasn't until around 313 BC, when in the edict, I believe it was called the Edict of Milan, that Constantine, embraced the religion of Christianity. But he was a pagan, and he allowed Christianity and he allowed paganism. And later on, when you go up into the history around 380 AD, Theodosius, he made Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. That's how the Roman Empire went from the pagan Roman Empire to the Holy Roman Empire, that was ruled by Jake. All right. So when you fast forward this to the future, when these different, so-called European countries started coming back into power after they were, in prison, so to speak. They had this prison sentence over them, this dark cloud over them for a period of 1,000 years and more. They actually, started to take hold of the power of these different countries that were run by Jake at the time. So it went from the Byzantine Empire to the Renaissance Empire, or the Renaissance Age. Now, when you go, I typed in here just to see what chat would say. It says, when did pagan Rome become the Holy Roman Empire? Right? The transition from pagan Rome to the Holy Roman Empire wasn't a direct transformation, but rather a complex historical process involving the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which was ruled by Esau. You know, and then eventually Jake took over, but they kept running it in the pagan ways. And the rise of the Christianized Germanic kingdom in Europe. Here's a breakdown to clarify the timeline and the distinction. Pagan Rome founding of to 4th century AD. Rome founded 753 BC. That was Romulus and Remus, which they were Japhites, brown skinned Japhites, okay, not Edomites. You know, it wasn't until way later, roughly around 65 BC, you know, going further down to when Julius Caesar was first came to the throne, or so first came to power as a Caesar, that Edomites started taking over, you know, the what was known as the Roman Empire, right? So it said, and the Roman Republic, they just took it from the dark skin or brown skin Japhites. So it says Roman Republic 509 through 27 BC. This is when Julius Caesar was first put up, you know, as Caesar, you know, a so-called president back there. All right. Roman Empire pagan 27 BC to 313 AD. Now, 27 BC to 96 AD, that was the pagan Roman Edomite Empire. 96 BC to 313 AD, that was Jake, you know, the Roman Israelite pagan empire. 313 AD and forward, that's when they started to incorporate Christianity into the empire. Paganism was the dominant religion. Emperors were often deified. It says, Christianization of the Roman Empire. Emperor Constantine's Edict of Milan, 313 AD, legalized Christianity. Theodosius, 379 to 395, made Nicene Christianity the state religion. Edict of Thessalonica, 380 AD. Pagan practices were gradually banned and Christian influence grew. That's how it became known as the Holy Roman Empire. Fall of the Western Roman Empire, 476 AD. It says the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odysseus. So pretty much they were in rulership under that system, you know, until about 476 AD. But the starting point of the 1,000 years really began when Esau fell, you know, but, you know, we have estimated it going back, you know, to the elders at One West to roughly around 325 AD with the Nicene Council, because that's what established, you know, started to establish the Holy Roman Empire. So you can understand the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, continued until 1453, right? In 1453, Mehmet II, I believe he was a Ottoman Turk, right? And he painstakingly, I forget how many years it took, but he painstakingly fought against Constantinople, which was very fortified. It took a lot for them to eventually take it down. And the only reason why they took it down because it was prophesied, you know, and that's when the Eastern Roman Empire, whose capital was in Constantinople, was taken down, and the Ottoman Empire was established, you know, and that's when Islam came in there. So you have a mixture of Ottoman, Turks, which are Edomites, and Jake, you know, in that region. So when you see those Turkish people, a lot of them are Jakes, you know, some of them are Ottomans, some of them are Ishmael, you know, there's a mixture. It says formation of the Holy Roman Empire, 800 AD through 962 AD. Charlemagne, which Charlemagne was a Jake, crowned emperor of the Romans in 800 AD by Pope Leo III, often seen as the symbolic birth of the Holy Roman Empire, which really goes back, you know, further than that. All right. It says, however, the term Holy Roman Empire and its formal political structure took shape in 962 AD when Otto I was crowned emperor by the Pope. Yeah, but the beginning origins of that goes back to 313, 325 AD. All right, so this is the summary it gives you. Boom, 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 boom. So now, when did pagan Rome become the Holy Roman Empire? There is no single moment where pagan Rome became the Holy Roman Empire. Rather, pagan Rome converted to Christianity 4th to 5th centuries. The Western Roman Empire fell 476, and over 300 years later, the Holy Roman Empire was established 800 to 962. Blah, 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 blah. So what I did was, what year did the Byzantine Empire end and the Renaissance period start? And this is important to know, because this part of history is important to know because it lines up with prophecy. And we have a saying, if you don't know the history, you won't know the mystery. All right, so it says, great question. These two events are historically linked, but they don't line up perfectly. End of the Byzantine Empire, year 1453, which I explained, AD. Event, the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks under Sultan Mehmet II. There was an actual series on Netflix on this. That was bad, man. And they show you how Mehmet, he actually painstakingly took that down. It was something to see. This marked the definitive end of the Eastern Roman Empire, aka the Byzantine Empire, which was run by Jake, which had lasted over 1,000 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. See, so knowing this, because key points are that 1,000 year, that 1,000 year, 1,000 year, 1,000 year, 1,000 year, 1,000 year. It keeps popping up. Let's go real quick to Revelation. The Bible is written in code, so it's not going to come straight out and say, well, the white man is Esau. They are, America is, Babylon the Great. It's also, don't forget, it's also spiritually known as Sodom and Egypt. You could throw Nineveh in there and Basra and Edom. It's not going to say it like that, because the Bible would have been banned. The Lord set it up that way because you have to have stumbling blocks, because the Lord has a sifting ground. He doesn't want every Israelite out there. He's only looking for the elect. So these guys that are trying to gather all Israel together under one banner, they're going totally off. They're doing their own will. They're serving their own belly. So it says, Revelation 21, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. The bottomless pit represents so-called Europe for its lack of mineral resources. All right. And lands are known as pits. When you go to the book of, I believe it's 2nd Ezra, it speaks about the Lord having one pit that he loves, and that pit is the land of Israel. All right. So it says, and a great chain in his hand. This great chain represents captivity, represents slavery, represents the curses, represents that dark cloud. Like today, Jake is in a through state. Why? Because of the curses. So the curses became a great chain upon us. So this great chain was upon Esau for a period of 1,000 years plus. So let's go to this word great chain. Let's see what it says. Might be two different words. Yep, it is. Great is megas, which is, great. And then the word for chain is halusis. It says a chain, bond by which the body or any part of it, hands, feet, is bound. All right. So what is that? That pretty much is a form of bondage, captivity. So this, it says, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And what did he do with this? He laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, right? So these terms here, to the unlearned Christian, they think it's talking about the spiritual demon Satan. And even in the Twilight Zone episode, they had an episode called The Howling Man. And the Howling Man, they showed you the so-called devil, right, which was an actual man, an Edomite, in a prison, locked up with a shepherd's staff holding him in. So they understand that this is not talking about the spiritual demon Satan, although the people that are you know that are driven by this power, are driven by the spiritual demon Satan, but it's the actual people that this is referring to. Like when they say Satan got cast out of heaven, no, that's not the case. What that means is that when Yahushua comes back, Esau and his angels, which are his jet fighters and all that, are going to be in a battle with the different nations and against each other, and they're going to turn that battle and fight against the Lord, and the Lord's going to destroy them, wipe them out, and never there won't be found place for Satan up in the heavens anymore, meaning Esau. They're not going to go up there unless we punt them up there. That's the only way they're going to be up in the air again. They'll never again fly up there. They'll never put their bullshit up there ever, anywhere. So that's what that's talking about. And when you understand it, Shalom, when you put all this together, through the dragon with the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the meaning of it, you see that, damn, that ain't talking about the spiritual demon Satan. That's talking about actual people, an allied force of Edomite nations put together that were cast out of heaven. So that was a big lie. The Christians have been duped into believing that because the Christians do not study, they do not look things up. So the point here is this people that are known as the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan. It says, and bound him 1,000 years. So this is what we're reading about in the history, of how when the Roman Empire fell, Esau was pretty much out of there for a period of 1,000 years plus. It says, and cast him into the bottomless pit, right? Because they were in Europe, so-called, but they were still bound. It's just like today. Jake is in America, right? But they're bound. They really can only go so far because of the curses. So Esau was under the curses at that time for that 1,000-year period plus. It says, and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more, right? Because once he was loose from that prison sentence, what did he do? He deceived the whole world. And this is where the Renaissance plays a very major role in that deception. Till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed to Little Caesar. So 1,000 years went by, plus then he started to be loosed to Little Caesar, right? So let's go back here. It says start of the Renaissance. The Renaissance doesn't have a single start year. It was a gradual cultural shift, but historians typically give a rough range. Early Renaissance Italy, circa 1300 to 1400, right? Because it started in the 1300s, but it really didn't take root until really like the mid to late 1400s. Because right here, high Renaissance, and this high Renaissance peak, this is when the deception was at its highest, 1490 to 1527, right? So general starts around 1350 in Florence, Italy. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 played a major role in accelerating the Renaissance in Western Europe, right? Because you had Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Donatello. I believe it was another artist, Donatello, which they used for the Ninja Turtles. You had a whole host of Edomite painters, artists that were putting up their renditions of themselves as being the new rulers. And they had to go all throughout so-called Europe and deface images and destroy frescoes and destroy the different paintings, and the wall reliefs that were set up by Jake. Because if they're going to rule, they have to deceive the world into believing that they are these people. And that's why they made the Most High a so-called white man. They made Yahushua a so-called white man, the angels and the Israelites. Because it says, Job 9:24, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So they are the ones that distorted history so that they can deceive the world to what? Fulfill prophecy. Greek scholars fled to Italy with ancient texts and knowledge. This helped classical learning and influenced art, philosophy, and science. So, started Renaissance, 1350. Fall of Constantinople, end of the Byzantine Empire, 1453. High Renaissance begins, 1490. And not too long after this, so-called Christopher Columbus, so-called discovered the New World, and that brought another level of deception because they brought that deception that was already started during the Renaissance over to us over here, the Northern Kingdom. It says, that was just to paint that picture. So let's go back to Daniel 7 and let's deal with this. Let's read this again and let's deal with this 10 horns. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, which is the Roman Empire. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and we broke that down, and it had 10 horns. Now, these 10 horns had ancient names going back, but like I said, it's a lot, it's choppy, so you're not going to be able to get everything to break it down. But when you come up to the time when this was reestablished as a new Roman Empire, right, through America, you had something known as the EU. Now, the European Union, EU, or the EEC, the European Economic Community, it started with 6 member nations, as you see here: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands. Now, in March of 1957, that's when they began the talks. It wasn't until January 1st, 1958, when they got their charter to become the EU. So it was firmly established in 1958. So you had 6 member nations, right? Now, in 1973, that's when Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom, joined. So that made it 9, but really is really 8. And I'm going to explain it to you, because if you type in, is Ireland a part of the UK, it's going to say no. But it's going to tell you that Northern Ireland, it's going to tell you Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland are part of the UK, but not the Republic of Ireland, right? The Republic of Ireland became a separate entity in 1922. But what I did was Ireland ever a part of the UK before it became a republic? Yes. The entire island of Ireland was a part of the United Kingdom from 1801 until the partition of the island in 1922. See? So this here should really be one, Ireland and United Kingdom. But this is 1973, so they're going to say it's 2, but it's really 1. All right? Then you have in 1981, you had Greece. So this would be really 9. And then in 1986, you have Portugal and Spain, which makes it 12. That's why you have 12 stars, but it's really 10 because Portugal and Spain are really connected. So on the same, it's the same. It's just similar to what's going on here in Ireland and the United Kingdom. They're on the same island, but it's just, okay, well, no, you're separate. No, they're the same. So it's really 10. So these are the 10. And these 10 here, when you look up all of these so-called European nations, they're all in the region where all of these different Germanic tribes and different allies of Rome were at. Let's see we'll see what we got. We don't really need that. How can we do this? You know what? Let me see. Can I? No, I can't do that. So let's just do this real quick. Europe map. I mean, we know it's not, but if you type in Eastern Asia, Western Asia, it's not going to give you what you need. So we got a so-called European map, right? Let's get this. Hopefully, this one highlights what we need. It gives us like an idea right here. It's kind of blurry. It's good details, but it's blurry about this one here. Just want to give you like an illustration. Hey man, what's up with these blurry ass? How about this one? Is this going to be blurry too? Sure is. God damn. Satan jumping on everything. Let's see. How about this one? Just to give you like a little illustration as to what you have. So you have Portugal, Spain, it's the same. Ireland, United Kingdom, this is all a part of the same thing. See, up here, this is Northern Ireland, so this is still part of the United Kingdom. But this part broke off in 1922. All right, so here it is. You have France and Spain, Portugal, same, Italy, Switzerland, Germany. These are all so-called, European countries that are all allied or were all allied with the Roman Empire. And this would be the 10 horns, because the word horn is a representation of power. All right. So we don't need this anymore. I should leave it just in case. All right. So we don't need that. So that's the 10 horns. Now let's build on that. Let's go to Revelation. Let's leave this here. Let's go to Revelation chapter 12. The chapter before this. And verse 3. It says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Now, in the book of Daniel, it didn't speak about the 7 heads. Okay? It only spoke about the 10 horns, because the 7 heads hadn't been, really fully established as empires. They were a lot of, they were vassals pretty much underneath the Roman Empire, and one of them that wasn't allied with them was Britain or England, as the Anglo-Saxons, but eventually they got hold of that. So these 7 heads would be the Greeks, which are the first, the Romans, the French, the Spanish, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and Britain. Those are the 7. All right. And the 10 horns, as we showed you here in this illustration, would be Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Denmark, the UK, Ireland included, Greece, and Spain. That's the 10. All right. So it says, and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Crowns is a representation of rulership. So these were 7 empires that ruled. So let's go from there to the next chapter over, Revelation 13:1. It says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, which is the Red Sea. I'm sorry, just the Mediterranean Sea, in that region, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And this beast, having 7 heads and 10 horns, is the same beast that's spoken of all throughout the book of Revelation. It's spoken of in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. It just gives it different characteristics and symbolisms in different chapters. Some chapters it calls it red, some chapters it call it scarlet, and upon his horns 10 crowns, which is a representation of rulership, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy that goes into them saying that the Most High, Yahushua, Christians, so on and so forth. All right, so let's transition from there. Go from there to Revelation 17, just hitting the points where it speaks about, the 7 heads and 10 horns. So Revelation 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. This woman, which is the harlot, in the first verse on down, is America. Sit upon the scarlet-colored beast. The scarlet-colored beast represents, the whole beast system of Esau. All the empires conglomerate together with the 10 horns all in one. And they carry the woman because the woman which is a harlot. She's also a queen. A queen, Quean, is a prostitute, a harlot. So they carry her upon their shoulders. And when you look at the dynamic of America with the EU, NATO, so on and so forth, they are the ones really carrying America, and America pretty much is shitting on them. That's why it says that whose look was more stout than his fellow. So they shitting on these, individuals that's carrying them, and they're like, you know what, we're tired of carrying this hoe. It says, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There goes the 7 heads and 10 horns again. And this is repeated over and over again in Revelation. And this in Revelation 17 and Revelation 13 and Revelation 12, which are all connected in others. When you read Revelation 12 further down, it tells you that this dragon, the 7 heads and 10 horns, is Satan that was cast out of heaven. You see? But yet, still in all, these Christians, they keep pushing the bullshit that Satan was cast out of heaven. And that's not the case. They try to link Lucifer in the book of Isaiah 14 to the devil. And Lucifer is not a name of the devil, unless you're applying it to the physical counterpart of Satan on the earth, which are the Edomites. And it's very easy. When you look at the term Lucifer, right, in Isaiah 14 in the English, it has a capital L, which is supposed to be like a what is it, a formal name? I forget what it's called. Because you spell your name with the capital, first letter capital, the rest small case. That's a personal name I think it's another term for it. But when you go back into the Hebrew, when you go back into the Latin and other translations, the first letter is a small case, because it's not a personalized name. It's a description. It's a descriptive name. Lucifer means light bearer. Proper name, the water brother. Lucifer means light bearer. Goes back to the Hebrew word hayalal, which means light bearer once again. Goes back to the Greek word eosphoros. Eos is light, phoros is to carry. So all of these terms or titles apply to Esau. Another name they have, going back to the 1500s, early 1500s, 15-something, 1520-something, 1530-something, was the Alumbrados, right? That's the enlightened ones, the Luciferians of the time, run by Inigo Lopez, which is Ignatius de Loyola. Later on, in 1776, May 1st, 1776, you had the Illuminati. Illuminati are also known as the light bearers. These are the individuals that would be set up and established during the great time of deception of the Renaissance to deceive the whole world by their light. And this is why the Lord, then they covered everything up. That's why the Lord said that he will remove the veil that is cast over all people. And this is what's happening right now. The curtain has been pulled all the way back. And the world is seeing Esau's nakedness and the lies that they've pushed out there. And it's slowly but surely, or actually fastly and surely, demolishing their kingdom, their reputation, that great glory that they had. The Lord said he will spew shameful spewing on their glory. All right. Let's go from there. I'm just going to jump around in this chapter. Verse 7 it says, and the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. So once again, the 7 heads and 10 horns scenario, right? Verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. See, so now we're getting to the understanding of what this great red dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns represents. It doesn't represent the spiritual demon Satan. It represents their physical counterpart on the earth, pursuant to Matthew 13, which are the Edomites and their 7 major empires with their allied forces. That's all it represents. which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Right. And when you break it up, the 1 hour with the beast is roughly around 42 years, I believe it was, when you break it down. And they were established in 1958. And pretty much from like 1998, 1999, you see the whole world economically is coming to a crash because of the US dollar. The Lord, man, just set it up lovely. That's why he said in Job that he set these devils in slippery places. So when you're in a slippery place, you can't hold on to that power. So the Lord said he broke the staff of the wicked. So they're through. They're finished. All right, let's jump to the 16th verse. It says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." So pretty much they're going to be instrumental, along with Russia and their allies, in destroying this place, America, although they've been allies with it. And you can read the book of Obadiah. It tells you that those that were Confederate with her have, lifted up the head against her, And these devils, they're so proud. They're like, I don't understand how they can be so mad and what's wrong with them. We've been helping them. No, you haven't. The Lord got a demonic blinded spirit on you to where you're doing wickedness to people, but you're acting like as if you're doing the right thing. Now, let's jump from there. Let's go back to Daniel 7. Now we're going to read the 8th verse. "I considered the horns," and this is important here, because these horns, which are 10, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. So this little horn, right, is a power that came up, and it was established as a small power, but they became a great power. And this is dealing with America. All right. It says, "Before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked by the roots." Right. Because when you look at the history of America, America was colonized by 3 major empires. The whole of the Americas, Canada included. You had the British, you had the French, and you had the Spanish. This is why when you look at a map of America, you have English names for certain states and cities, you have French names for certain states and cities, and you have Spanish names for certain states and cities. And they were taken out. You had the War of Independence, that was Britain, right? You had the Spanish-American War, that was Spain. And then you had the Indian Wars, which Gad and the French got together to fight against Esau. And this is how, and then what happened was Napoleon was involved in so many wars that he couldn't afford to hold on to the lands that he had conquered here in America. So he ended up selling them to America. And that's where you get the Louisiana Purchase from. You see? So they pretty much removed these 3 nations out of here. So at that point, it just became Esau here in America's land. All right. It says, "And behold, this horn were eyes like the eyes of, and behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of man, which represents wisdom, and a mouth speaking great things." Right. And America boasts great things. Trump is a perfect spokesman for this. He fits this perfect, even though this ain't talking about him specifically. It's talking about America, Babylon the Great, but he fits this. Like if his picture was right next to this verse, this part of the verse, it would fit perfect, because that's what America does. It just talks shit. It just blabbers shit without even thinking or taking heed to the consequences. All right. Let's see what else we got. So let's go from there, right, to the 24th verse. Like I said, we're just jumping around because it's a lot. I'm just trying to piece it together, to the different aspects and points in history, to paint the whole picture. Yahweh Bashem Shai Ratazah. Daniel 7:24, "And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings." So same thing in the book of Revelation 17. It explains what these horns represent. Their powers, rulerships, but they're smaller rulerships that are in subjection to the bigger rulerships, which would be the 7 heads. At the time when this would come to pass, the Roman Empire would be in power, which was really the second head, but the other ones were subdued under it. It says, and the let's read it again. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. This is dealing with America. This is the little horn that we read in the verse above. And he shall be diverse from the first, which we read about, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And we just explained what that meant. All right. Now let's jump from there to Revelation 13 again. And this time in Revelation 13, we're going to jump to the second verse. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. So now it's breaking down the beast from the beginning of the beast. The beginning of the beast, this leopard, is a representation of Alexander the Greek. All right. They call him the Great, we call him the Greek, the freak, whatever. So this is a rundown. So the leopard is the Greek Empire, and its feet, which is the end of it, were as the feet of a bear. Now, the bear represents Russia. Russia is never part of the beast, but they are the ones that's going to be used to end it. That's why the Russians are mentioned here. Russia is not a part of the beast. They are the ones that's going to be used to destroy the beast. Okay? It says, in his mouth, as the mouth of a lion. The mouth of a lion represents England, because this is where they get their marching orders from. Because allegedly, during the War of Independence, America got its freedom from England. But indirectly, behind the scenes, England is still running things here in America. It just gives you the appearance that America is being governed solely by themselves, but they're still tributary to them, because out of England, which is the power seat, the city-state of London, the Rothschilds are running this place from behind the scenes. You see? And this is history you're not going to learn in any college. You're not going to learn in any seminary school. You're not going to learn in any so-called place of higher learning. This is like top, information. This is top history information, and this particular history is very important because it's linked directly to prophecy. And if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand what it means when it says the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the little horn and and the this and the that and the beast that he had a deadly wound. I mean, what the hell's going on? It says, and the dragon gave him his power, right? Because the Roman Empire is pretty much what's driving. It's the driving force behind this American empire, and his seat and great authority. Now let's read also the 3rd verse. It says, and I saw one of his heads as they were wounded to death. Now, during the time when the Apostle John had this vision, the Roman Empire was in rulership, but it was the last year, because this was written roughly around 95, 96 AD, right? And 96 AD was when Domitian was taken down and Jake was established. All right? It says, and his deadly wound. So what we're reading here in verse 3 is a direct link with this 1,000 years here in Revelation 20 and 2. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. See? So when he was bound 1,000 years, when he fell, it said here in Revelation 13, right? And I saw one of his heads as were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. See? When his deadly wound was healed was during the time of the Renaissance period. It says, and cast him into the Revelation 20 and 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Right? And what did he do when he was loosed a little season? Verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, Esau, through the Renaissance, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. And that's why we go back to Revelation 13:3. And I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed during the Renaissance. And all the world wondered after the beast. Why? Because they had the power of deception. So the whole world was under that deception until the Lord rose up the prophets to strip away the veil and the mystery that had been used as a blinding upon the world. And through the prophets that they looked down upon, this truth has pretty much opened up the eyes of a lot of Israelites out there. And you have Edomites watching and looking and nervous, top elite included. So let's jump from there to the 11th verse. It says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. So this lines up with the little horn in Daniel, the 7th chapter, not the 8th chapter. Two little horns, two separate little horns. So, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. This represents their bipartisan system, which is two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, which is really one. And he spake as a dragon. This is dealing with their legislation. We see that happening right now. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, which was what? The Roman Empire. And caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And the deadly wound was healed during the time of the Renaissance period. And let's look up this word exercise, so you can see what that means. The word there is poieo, right? Poieo is to make, with the name of things made, to produce, construct, form, fashion. To be the authors of the cause, to make, ready, to prepare. Just trying to get acquire, provide, thing, to make, thing, to make, constitute, appointed thing, to make, declare, to be the authors, to do, to carry out, execute, designation of time, to celebrate, make ready, so that at the same time to institute, to celebrate, the past, to perform to a promise. So they exercise, they come in the same fashion as the ancient Roman Empire. Let's look this up in the NLT, see what it says. He exercised all the authority of the first beast, and he required all the earth and his people to worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. You know what? Exercised all the power of the first beast. The power is it's different. Exousia, a power of choice, liberty of doing as one pleases, physical, the ability, the power of authority, influence, and right, privilege, the power of rule or government. See, so this is the power of rule of government. They exercise the power of rule of government of what? The beast who had a deadly wound, which is a Roman Empire. The power of him whose will and commands must be submitted to by others and obeyed, right? Because remember, we read in Daniel 7 that when the fourth kingdom came in, it stamped the residue with the feet of it. So they had to become tributary, just like America. You have to become tributary to America. And that's why these nations of the earth are mad, because America is abusing that power. Even so much so as to their own allies. So let's go from there. Let's go to Revelation 17. Let me see, do I still have that up? Nope. So let's go to Revelation 17 and 8. And hopefully, I pray that, you brothers, few sisters are following along. Hope I'm not losing anybody. Because this is just basic history. It's not anything complicated. It's just basic history and just tying it into prophecy. Revelation 17 and 8. The beast that thou sawest was. So in the vision that the Apostle John had, He saw this particular beast, this woman, and it was a representation of something. This particular beast that is speaking of in the 8th verse is dealing with America. The beast that thou sawest was and is not. Why? Because it was in his vision, but it was not at the time. Because America did not exist. I mean, the landmass was here, but the name America and the power following or exercising the power of Rome did not exist at that time. It says, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, right? Because America came from what? It came from so-called Europe. And it came from not just from England, but it came from all of those different so-called European empires. It says, and go into perdition, because once it was established, eventually it would be destroyed. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Right? They're going to follow behind America and their false ways until they be destroyed. Because remember, the Lord said he was sending strong delusions that they would believe a lie. And although this truth is going out, the scriptures are being broken down, the mysteries are open, the doors of the minds of Jake out here are still closed off to this truth. They can't receive it because there's an actual angel there blocking the message from getting through. It says, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is, which is dealing with America, right? It says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. So now the angel is going to break it down. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. Mountains, sometimes it's talking about an actual mountain. In this case, it's talking about governments. And this scripture here is the reason why you have some individuals that say that the Vatican is this beast, the great red dragon, the scarlet colored beast. That's not talking about the Roman or the Vatican. And the reason why it's not talking about them, because when you read other parts of the prophecies in Revelation, they don't fit that, except for the part of the false prophet. Because all religions out there that you see that deal with these Abrahamic religions all stem back from the Roman Catholic Church. And all of them are wrong. All of them are off. They're all teaching some wayward, bugged out, unsound doctrine. Right? So these are governments on which the woman sitteth, and the woman sitting on them means that they're being carried because she's a queen. She's that harlot. And a queen, she could sleep with whoever she wants. So it says, and there are 7 kings, which letting you know 7 rulerships. 5 are fallen, because by the time the Apostle John saw this vision, all of these other kings were in subjection to Rome. So you had the Greeks were in subjection to Rome, the French, the Spanish, Germania Major and Germania Minor. They were in subjection to Rome. Now you had no man's land, which it was blocked off. But for the most part, those areas there where Rome governed, they were all in subjection to the Roman Empire. It says, and the one that is what? The Roman Empire. And consequently, to borrow that word from Jordan Maxwell, the Roman Empire, although it fell the same year or around the same time when this prophecy was written, the Edomite Roman Empire, it still continued on as a pagan Roman Empire being ruled by Jake. And the other is not yet come. Right, the other that is not yet come is talking about the British Empire. They didn't come along till way later in the future. No, you had that land, the Anglo-Saxons, and they had power there, but remember, Jake took over all those regions, and eventually it wasn't until way later, like the 1700s around there, where England really started to become a major, empire in the world. It says, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space, right? Because they didn't hold on to that dominant, empire status as they once did. Because once America came in there, they knocked them out the box. Once the Federal Reserve system and the dollar became the world reserve currency, that knocked out the British pound, and the British pound was the currency of the world at the time. It says, and the beast that was, which is America, and is not, even he is the eighth. And this is key. Why? Because this ties into the little horn. Okay? So the eighth head, which is the eighth empire, is America. And is of the seven because it stems from all seven of those major so-called European empires and goeth into perdition because it's going to be destroyed. And we see the prophecy speaking and setting this place up for the greatest fall. And that pompous pride is moving them to this. That's why the Lord said that the pride of thy heart has deceived thee. You hear you puffing at these different nations that's supposed to be your allies, and you're shitting on them. And they're going to be the ones that's going to eventually get tired of your shit and destroy you because the Lord's going to put it in their heart to do so. All right, so let's go back to Daniel 7. Now we're going to go to 20, right? It says, and of the, I'll start at 19. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, break in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And Daniel did not understand what this meant. Even though the angel broke it down to him, he didn't know what this was speaking about. Because this wouldn't happen for another roughly 700 years or so in the future from when this was written. Depending on when the calculations of the time period, they put within 700, 800, 750, whatever BC when this was written. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, which was that little horn. We read that's the eighth. That's the one whose deadly wound was healed. That's the other beast. And before whom 3 fell, which we broke that down, Spanish, the French, and the British, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellow, right? And they look down upon these European nations. They have National Lampoon, European Vacation, and they show you in that it was a comedy, but they show you in there how these other European Edomite nations, so-called European Edomite nations, feel about America. They can't stand these devils, but they made it into a comedy. But it's actual factual. All right. So let's go from there to Daniel 7 and 11. It says, I beheld them because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. And this is going to be done by Russia, which we read in Revelation 13, the feet of the bear, and also by other allies of Russia and also by allies of America. Let's go back to Revelation 17 and let's go down to the 12th verse. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. This began in 1958. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, right? Because they're going to come against America. They're going to be by the time the destruction comes, they're going to be so fed up, which they're already fed up, but they're going to be so fed up that they're going to really level this place out with everything they got. Now let's jump down to the 16th verse. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, see, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Why? For the Most High hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast, unto the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. It's all about the Most High's will being fulfilled. And this is what the beast, the great red dragon, the beast, the great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and the 10 crowns upon their heads represents. It's a force of these 7 plus 1, 8 empires, Edomite empires that are conglomerate, that are together, stemming back from the Greek Empire all the way up until modern day. You know, and when you go through the history, the Greek Empire under Alexander the Greek was ruled from 330 BC to roughly around 146 BC, but really it was amalgamated around 25 BC with the last 2 rulers of Greece, which was Ptolemy the 13th and Cleopatra the 7th. And that was they were absorbed into the Roman Empire. That's what's known as a Greco-Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was 27 BC, really to around 96, BC, AD, when the mission fell, but Jake took it over. So that's why they equate it to 476 AD, because that is when the Western Roman Empire fell, and the way it was ruled, right? Then you had the Spanish Empire, which came into power in 1492 until roughly around 1970, 1975. Then you had the French Empire, which came into power 1534 to roughly around 1980 AD. Then you had the German Empire, which was from 1871 AD to roughly around 1919 AD. And then you had the British Empire, which was about 93 or so to about 1997. And really, it was really 1944, if you really want to put a date on it. So it's a lot of history. You're not expected to remember all of this. This is just, little different little nuggets, just to have some brothers like particulars, and some brothers just like a broad, just a main thing. Like when you read the Gospels, when you read the Gospel of Mark, it's like, just broad, boom, boom, just points. When you read the book of John, there's a lot of details, there's a lot of details in there, so there's some that are more detailed than others. You see, so, I pray that this lesson was edifying. You see, the prophecy speaking. You see right now England is implementing a digital ID in order for people to work. It's mandatory. If you don't get it, you ain't going to be able to work, which is one step closer to the MOTB system, which is the micro CHIP. And all they have to do is get the system online. Afterwards, they can make the necessary provisions to push the micro CHIP, And the way things are going, they're pushing fast. From 2020 to now, 5 years later, look how quickly Esau's infrastructure, the MOTB system, has been put in place. And as the knowledge and the technology continues to increase, they're going to put it in faster and faster and faster, So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.